stretched with appointments and things, so we'll get right into it. So I'm just going to welcome Martin Strauss, who's from Taunton, and he's our Jewish representative. And so perhaps what we can do, because Martin will have to leave during the session, that we can have questions and answers as soon as he's finished, or if it's all right with you, Martin, if people could perhaps ask while you're talking, so the thought is fresh in their mind.
Yes, that's fine. This is an open discussion.
That's all right with you? Okay, all right. So so let's start. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. So just say a little bit about Jews in Somerset. There is a basic problem about Somerset, which I will raise at this stage. As I understand it, Somerset County Council for many years hasn't permitted allocated Jewish burial plots for either Jews or Muslims. And Orthodox Jews will find that a major problem. We have a pretty small Jewish community, particularly in and around Taunton, and I suspect that's why some people won't come down. It's not just Taunton, it's the southwest, but it's particularly unusual for a county to say that you can't have an allocated burial plot. I mean, it happens in Exeter, it happens in Plymouth. In fact, I'm a trustee of the Plymouth Synagogue, and I was associated for some years with Exeter Synagogue. Plymouth is the oldest Ashkenazi Jewish community in the whole of the country. It's over 250 years old, and Exeter followed soon after. So we have a very long Jewish tradition down there. Many Orthodox Jews will insist not only on a Jewish burial plot, but also various other facilities at the burial ground, which we don't have in this part of the world. You could manage this in Devon, but you can't in Somerset. So I stress this at the beginning. The other thing I would say is that following on from that, many of the Jews who do live in this part of the world aren't strictly Orthodox. I really believe that if you are strictly Orthodox, you're probably more likely to be in a bigger Jewish community with all those facilities. And Orthodox Jews certainly would not approve of cremation. But in practice, I do know that many people I've known who've died in this part of the world in recent years who are Jewish do actually accept a cremation. It's not part of the Jewish tradition, but it's becoming much more common. And the last thing I would say, I was looking into this for Exeter Jewish congregation, because although they have a facility with Exeter Council where they have a definite Jewish burial plot attached to a main cemetery in Exeter, they do have the problem that it's filling up fast. In the next 4 to 5 years, it will be full. So one of the projects that I was looking at on behalf of Exeter was Woodland Burial Grounds. This is a sort of halfway house. It might not be the same as having an actual Jewish cemetery, but there's much more flexibility in how you conduct the cemetery as the ceremony. And I did in fact find one in Devon for the Exeter community, where they would actually allow us to have a dedicated Jewish burial plot as part of the cemetery. Nothing like this, I'm afraid, exists in Somerset. So it's something I'm continuing to research and to promote. I think it's wrong that there is no facility for Jews or Muslims to have dedicated burial grounds in Somerset, and maybe it is something that should be looked at. I am standing as a candidate for Taunton Town Council. It is one of the things that I will be pressing for, because I think it's important in principle. I think that's all I want to say at this stage. Let's open it up for discussion. I'll try and clarify as far as I'm aware practices. I have been involved in most of the aspects of Jewish communities over my lifetime. I went to an Orthodox Jewish school. I've been involved at a senior level in many of the communities around the country that I've been involved in, and in Sri Lanka. So, I mean, I have a pretty broad spectrum from liberal and progressive Judaism through to ultra-Orthodox. So I can talk with some authority.
That actually might be a good point to bring in Shahid or Ismail. I'm not sure which name you're going by. Sorry.
Hi guys, sorry, I'm using
Hi.
my son's laptop because I've broken mine.
I did wonder, but then I thought, oh no, maybe.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, particularly around this topic around the burials.
Yeah, so hi guys, my name's Shahid Akram. I'm from Bristol, born here as well. So my role is I'm a local funeral director and we cover the Southwest, only dealing with Muslim funerals. Okay, and I also sit on the National Burial Council, which is a body which works closely with the government on various sort of legislation matters, as well as dealing with disasters similar to Grenfell, because obviously there was a large Muslim population in that incident, and just looking at the provision for Muslims to be buried in and around. So my jurisdiction is the Southwest, so I do quite a lot in that area. You know, so that's what I'm all about. So do you want me to carry straight on, Janine?
No, I'm wondering if you caught what Martin was actually saying about the difficulties facing particularly the Jewish and Muslim communities around burial plots.
Yes, now that is quite a massive issue. So thanks for pointing that out, Martin. The issue is identical in the Muslim community as well.
Thank you for
it is very challenging, okay, to deal with, especially when we can't. Somerset's one of those areas, I'm afraid, if we talk about Somerset, it's very difficult to get things through, I'm afraid. I was approached by a family from Glastonbury and the ladies of Muslim faith, and she said, look, I don't want to be transported around the country when I get buried. I want to be buried here. So she approached us through the NBC. So I got in touch with the council. Unfortunately, I heard nothing back. So I was told the officer to be in touch with. So it can be very difficult. On the other hand, we had a similar one in Taunton recently. When I say recently, before pre-COVID, and we had very good friends down there who were ending life due to age and illnesses. And the plan was actually to bring them to Bristol to bury them. But the more we talked about it, the more we noticed they wanted to stay where they were, because obviously their loved ones and their friends can visit and pay their respects. So long story short, I sat on the COVID resilience panel in Bristol, and we brought it up there because what I didn't want to do as a funeral director is encourage bodies being moved around, you know, obviously the pandemic as well. So I said, look, guys, I'm really not happy about this. And we looked at it, we approached the council, and from start to finish, it took 6 months. Okay, so quite near to Musgrove Hospital, there's quite a predominant cemetery. I forget what it's called. I think it may even be called Musgrove something. But they've given us a piece of land there in amongst with everybody else, but it's a separate sort of section. And the only difference, obviously, with Muslims is the right-hand side of our body is sort of facing the southeast. So we had to get that bit right. And it was operational within 6 months. So this can happen. And my role in National Burial Council is trying to simplify that process, because obviously, I mean, we could be Muslims as Christians or Jews and Sikhs and Hindus, but we all have our customs from where we come from. There's some traditions that come along. So from a council perspective, it can be quite daunting as well, thinking, right, okay, we're going to accommodate what you want, but are we actually accommodating for your whole community? All right, so that's where people like myself come in, and we just try and simplify the process, because we don't confuse the customs with the faith, because Islam is not that we're special or there's anything, you know, overly precious about us. I mean, it's what God tells us. When we die, there shouldn't be delays. We should try and, you know, return this creation, like it says in the Quran, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Surely we come from the Lord, and to the Lord is where we need to be returned. He delivered us into this world pure, and what he wants us to do is, when they go back, to be pure as well. So, you know, there's a few things that we need to do. I'm sure when I get a chance, I'll talk about. So it's a very important part. I'm sure with many faiths, obviously, death is quite significant, but Islam differs in terms of, for a Muslim, the most important part of his or her life is going to be the death part. That's the most important thing. Okay, so you know, if someone died now, you know, I don't get my diary out saying, right, okay, I'm going to be free on. It's nothing like that. This goes out the window. Now we need to deal with the death, and that's how Muslim deaths work. You know, so it's all done providing we can, of course, and there's no coroner engagement or complications, which we have to respect, and we do our best, you know, to get it done as soon as possible, you know. So it's quite a complex sort of situation, if you like, because we've got to do exactly what every other faith has to do. We have to go through the same legalities, but we just have, you know, we've sort of built that rapport up. Everyone seems to know what we need, you know, and they understand the faith, you know, and it 9 times out of 10 it does fall into place. And the difficulties, like what Martin said, is when we're out in the open sticks and we haven't got a burial plot there, then obviously, you know, it does get a bit difficult because people have to make rash decisions. You know, like in Bristol, we had one last week, a 1.5-year-old beautiful little angel passed away, and the family literally live opposite the council cemetery. But the council said, well, sorry, we can't give you, we've got no staff, they're sick. We can't do Friday, we can't do Saturday, Sunday, we can't do Monday. So I said, guys, you know, and so they decided to go for the other one, the private one, which is 10 miles the other side of town. And they buried on the next day. Okay, so, you know, that's just a typical example of people where they've had to go out of their way, you know, and they felt it was, you know, it was incumbent on them just getting it done, you know, because what we believe Islamically is that there's an element of distress and discomfort for the deceased the longer we remain. We also believe we can hear and we can feel. Yeah, sorry, Martin, go ahead.
No,
Yes.
I'd just like to come back on what you've just said, because exactly the same criteria apply to Jews. I mean, we're both Semitic religion.
On the same page,
both have the
absolutely.
same attitude to burial. It has to be done quickly. And that is a major problem sometimes. What I also want to just say as an aside, the very first mayor of Taunton was Jewish, and he was actually an Orthodox Jew. And they couldn't find a rabbi to conduct the ceremony. He's actually buried in Taunton in that small cemetery that is next to the college. And it's in an unmarked grave. But at the time, a nonconformist minister conducted the ceremony. He was a very well-respected man, but we couldn't conduct a conventional Jewish funeral at the time. And that's still the same today, all these years later. I mean, this goes back, he died in 1901. And we haven't come any further really in that respect since then. So I just want to make that point. It's part of Taunton's heritage too, that we've never ever accommodated Jews and Muslims in burial terms.
I'm going to come back to you, Martin, just so we can go have a talk about the different practices. But and Nagari, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I think I have to say that we have similar problem in Taunton, especially. I live in South Petherton, and when my husband died a year and a half ago, Baha'is, when they are buried, and his burial mainly, they have to be orientated differently than ordinary cemeteries. They have to be orientated towards Akkar, where Baha'u'llah's remains are, which is the point of adoration. So I approached the parish council in this area, and which is in South Petherton. It's about 2 miles away from us, where I live. And they allowed me in the council cemetery to buy 2 plots so that I could orientate it to the right direction. And it went very smoothly. And I'm grateful for all the people who work in the parish council to allow me to do that.
Great. Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe.
Could I just
sorry,
come back
yeah.
on that? Yeah, the cost of a plot is quite a lot of money these days, and to have to buy 2 plots for some people is going to cause tremendous financial stress. The cost of a council burial in the first place is not cheap. I know because I've been going through the numbers for the Exeter community. So we do need a better solution. And I think, you know, so far we're all in agreement. And with a new unitary council for Somerset and a change in administration, things are being looked at afresh. There's never been a better time in recent years to address this. And I think this whole exercise we're conducting today is extremely timely. And I'd like to thank you for arranging this.
It's my pleasure, but it was actually Laura's Laura's request, because they're primarily around education within the NHS, and they've done some great work on end of life information and things like that. So I might just come back to you, Martin, about if perhaps there are patients, people, particularly at end of life care. Is there anything from the Jewish perspective that people caring for them should perhaps know or understand or be aware of?
Well, very often it forms part of the chaplaincy service. I'm not sure whether there's anybody who's Jewish actually who's involved in this at the moment. I have offered at Musgrove to join the service on a limited basis. I have so many other aspects of my life, and I wouldn't want to take on something I couldn't see through. But if it's somebody who's Jewish in Musgrove, I'm happy to talk to them. We do have somebody in Yeovil who was the past president of the Exeter community, who does sterling work there. I know that in the Exeter hospitals, we've always had that service. Taunton has been sadly lacking in so many ways. It's ironic in all these years, we've never ever had a synagogue in Taunton. But we do have Jews who come together once a month for Jewish social and cultural activities, but we don't have a synagogue, we don't have a community as such. In Somerset, I mean, there was a community in Bath, for example, but under cemetery, but the cemetery has been long since closed. There's no community. You have either to go to Bristol or you have to go to Exeter or Plymouth. There is no structure at the moment in Taunton, and probably not enough Jews to make it viable.
And so, for example, you know, you're saying there's not really a Jewish chaplain that you know of, particularly in Musgrove, perhaps in other areas in Somerset there may be. So if you have a patient that you're actually nursing who is Jewish and they are coming to the last few hours of life, is there anything in particular, because I mean, you may not be able to call a chaplain, their family members may not be there. Is there anything in particular that the caring staff can actually help or be aware of that perhaps they should be doing, or even asking the patient, because we can't assume that every person who says I'm Jewish, I'm Muslim, I'm Baha'i, I'm whatever, is actually going to want to engage with those rituals at any point in their lives, but to have the knowledge to even ask, is this something you would like us to do? I think would be beneficial to the person caring for that individual.
Well, the most important thing I think is that many Jews, even though if they haven't been religious during their lives, when it comes to end of life, they do want a form of Jewish funeral. Our funerals are very simple. We don't have elaborate coffins. They're made of very thin wood that will go back to dust as soon as possible. There are lots of things to do with that. And the prayers are quite meaningful to Jews. So having somebody who is aware of Jewish practice to conduct the funeral ceremony is very important. And I suspect it's the same in the Muslim community. It's very important to people at the end of life to have that spiritual experience if that's what they want. And so, but they need to talk to somebody. That's why I'm saying I'm happy to volunteer my services should that happen. But it's a question of asking them what they want. We have prayers that are said by the individual before he dies, and certainly certain prayers that are said during the funeral ceremony, which are very important.
And is there anything, you know, I know with Muslims, you know, we try to get buried as soon as possible. With Jewish people, are there time constraints around this, the burial?
Exactly the same as in Islam. We our practice is to bury the body as quickly as possible. Of course, all this arose at a time when Jews and Muslims lived in much warmer climes. It's very important for the body to be buried quickly. Yes. But having said all that, we have traditions that have continued to this day, regardless of climate.
Well, that's true. I mean, but who would have thought that Britain would be living in warmer times at 40 degrees Celsius in the summer? So
Yes.
we
That's
can't
true as
assume
well.
anything anymore. Yes, Nagar?
I was just going to say there isn't a time restraint as far as Baha'is are concerned, but there is a distance constraint. Baha'is have to be buried where they die, only an hour's journey by vehicle
Yeah. Right.
from the place of death. So it is quite important, it has to be local. Thank you.
Laura, do you have any of you have any questions for Martin?
Yeah, I just wanted to chip in really. I'm sure you've already, I'm sorry we missed the introductions at the beginning, but I just wanted to chip in kind of what we were hoping to kind of collate from the meeting today, to take away from Martin's perspective, if that's okay, because it was basically I approached you, Janine, because I thought you knew all the contacts, you certainly do, and all this came about is that we were reviewing with our colleagues from the bereavement service, the new care after death policy, and on the back of that, introducing some education to staff. And it just says, make sure you include spiritual care practices for the deceased and their loved ones. We thought, well, that's great, but how can we make that more specific for staff? So we have this policy, we have this education, but we just wanted to tailor it a little bit because we're very aware that there may well be how we care for somebody, how we lay them out, how we wash them and care for them. There may be certain things we need to incorporate as part of that process. So specifically thinking about that person who's just died, or perhaps as they're dying, the prayers, candles, if family are only allowed to do wash certain areas, you know, it's quite an intimate practice, and we just wanted to make sure we were doing right by the people we're working with. So we run the Somerset End of Life Care and Bereavement Support website, and what we would like to do is to tailor an area for staff, for NHS staff, but also we work with the hospices, we work with the care community, to say, you know, if you've got somebody who is of the Baha'i faith, this is what you would need to kind of bear in mind. Or if you've got somebody who's from Sikh faith, then make sure you don't do this and ask the family to do that, and make sure you include, just so we can just, I suppose, on a local level sign point, you know, like who's the local rabbi, we don't know. You know, so it's those that kind of really practical information we wanted to kind of really include, just to kind of give staff a bit of kind of signposting, because just saying make sure you care for them in a spiritual sense is very, very broad from our point of view. We really didn't know where to start, and then I started Googling, and I went down a Google hole, and I thought, I know, I'll just go talk to Janine, see what to be honest.
That's nice.
So just for everyone on the call today to bear that in mind, really, any tips you can give us, any kind of like, oh, don't forget about this would be really important. So the burial stuff, absolutely, but wider than that, thinking about the care of that person's body before they're buried, before they're cremated, whatever the process is really valuable information for us. So I just wanted to chip in with that, really. So
Great. Yes, Martin.
I can come back on that. I work very closely with Adrian Prior-Sankey, who is...
He will be on later today.
Yes.
Later. Yeah.
And Adrian and I work very closely together on many issues. He's done a lot of work on this, and he's pretty knowledgeable actually about the Jewish practices. The issue that we have in Taunton, it's just not possible to have a copybook funeral as we would have if we had a rabbi and somebody to conduct the ceremony and the proper facilities, the burial ground, and all of that you get in a Jewish community. So what we have to do is compromise, and it's something I will work on with Adrian. There is no perfect answer, because the facilities do not exist in Somerset. They only exist in, as I say, in Devon. Devon's always had a more enlightened attitude. If you go to both Exeter and to Plymouth has its own cemetery. Exeter has a plot which is attached to the council cemetery, but they do have far more involvement, and they will send people out to Somerset to conduct the ceremony if available. Some of the members of the Exeter community who are quite knowledgeable about these actually live in Somerset. So what we need to do is work on this. As I say, it will always have to be a compromise, but I think we can offer a much better advisory service than has been the case in the past. I'm more than happy to coordinate that with you.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. But say tomorrow they have somebody in their care that's Jewish and has just died, and Laura's staff are looking after them. Is there something they need to do? Do they leave the body? Do they wait for a funeral director to come? I was reading somewhere, I don't want to speak for Sikhs, but I was reading somewhere that, you know, if a Sikh person dies in a hospital setting or not at home setting, then you just need to cover them with a white sheet, and then someone else will come and do everything else. Obviously, that's in an area where there are other people that can come and do something else. I think we've established that Somerset is a very challenging place to be. It's also challenging because ratio to population wise, there's very few people of these various faiths that are available to help out at a particular time. So if for example, I'm a Jewish person and I've just passed away, is there something practical that the nursing staff, the caring staff should do?
Yes. What I would say is this: funeral directors are very knowledgeable about these things. I personally, for many years, was involved with the Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors, who are traditional family businesses. They're not part of this huge American combine, which pretends to be separate local funeral directors and aren't. They're extremely ethical. I worked with them for many years, and they do have members here in Taunton. So what I'm proposing to do is have a meeting with I think it's Crescent Funeral Directors. I know the owner very well, as a model for other funeral directors. We're not saying this is the only funeral director you should go to, but we will try and establish some procedures that would be immediately available for anybody who's Jewish who wanted them. I think that's the way forward in the short term.
Okay, wonderful. Great, thank you. We will, and what we can perhaps do is, once you create that model, because as I said, we were going to send this out and we'll put this on our website as well for people to be able to access. Once you've created that model, we can put this on our website as well for people to be able to access. So, yes, I'm fairly aware of the time that people have got to go and anything. Laura, are there any other questions for Martin? I know you're going to be around for a while, Martin, but any other questions?
Yeah, Karen just
It
wanted
was
to
just
chip
a
in.
quick question, just from a practicality perspective, can I, as a nurse, touch the body of a Jewish person who has died?
That's not
Because the care,
sorry, do go on.
the care that we give when somebody has died on the ward in the hospital is that we would wash their body,
Yes.
we would wrap it and prepare it to go to the mortuary.
Yes.
So am I allowed to do that? Or does it have to be another Jewish person that does that?
As I've said already, we have to reach an acceptable compromise. I would say the answer is yes. Go ahead and do what you're doing at the moment.
So
in the short term,
traditionally,
right, yes.
would it be that it should be a Jewish person that touches a deceased Jewish person?
Yes, but the problem is that person doesn't exist in Taunton.
Right.
You
Okay.
can't just
Right.
leave the body. It's a question of evolving sensitive practices that
Sure,
we can live with, because
Yeah.
we haven't got what we would like in an ideal world, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And
If
I'm
we
more than
did
happy
have
to
an
work
ideal
with you.
world, for
Sorry?
instance, in Somerset, if we did have that opportunity,
Yeah.
the idea would be that it would be a Jewish person delivering the care to another Jewish person.
Well,
Okay.
traditionally, the body would be taken to the home, and the body would lie there until it was collected by it's usually a funeral society attached to a synagogue if you were in a big area, and they would take all care of all the arrangements. But that doesn't exist down here. So what we have to do is try and reach an acceptable compromise. I said I'm delighted that Adrian's now joined us, because I've said before you came, Adrian, I'm more than happy to talk to you, and let's work out a system that works for Taunton, the best we can do in difficult circumstances. Certainly an allocated Jewish burial space in Somerset is a priority. The fact that it's never existed is an absolute disgrace, I have to say, because if you look at every other county in the country, they've managed it. Why is it just Somerset that's been so much against it? But we do have a new unitary council. I can't say it's often enough. We have a new council with a completely different can-do attitude, and they listen. We're changing a lot of things. And I think this is the ideal time to bring this up, and let's try and establish a compromise system that works for people who die of Jewish faith in Somerset, and particularly Taunton.
Thank you, Martin. Can I just ask for the other people on the call, is that the same sort of the general rule, sort of in your faith? It would be you prefer somebody of the same faith to care for the person, but actually if it has to be an NHS member of staff, that's okay?
Nagar, you want to answer that?
It's okay if you wash and dress. My husband died and he was put in some pajamas and was in the mortuary for about 2 weeks, I think. And it's fine if you do that. And the nurses were very, very understanding and very good.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that.
We'll come on to the others. I think Shahid and Adrian will address those when they kind of give their talk. I just wanted to clarify with you, Karen. So I just want to clarify that as far as the Jewish perspective goes, in the understanding that really there are not enough Jewish people to go around to attend and help and be present, that you would just treat the body in the usual respectful manner and processes that you would treat anybody. Is that correct, Martin?
100%. As I say, I will, with Adrian, do some more research on the best that we can do in the area, but we don't have the qualified people to do this here in Taunton. It just doesn't exist. So we're talking about an ideal world, and what we have to do is find out what's the best way that we can carry out these activities in those circumstances. And I can't really say more than that. It's pointless saying what should be done in an ideal world if the people aren't there.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think also too, I mean, a lot of faith and belief is about intention. I certainly know from the Islamic perspective, it's about intention. And if you get things wrong, things get wrong. We're human. But the intention is, and certainly in the setting that you have of end-of-life care, is to give as much dignity and care to the patient and the families as possible. And, you know, if there are some little clinks along the way because of someone's faith or spirituality, then I'm sure that people will be understanding of that. And the fact that you are looking now for the information shows that your intention is well placed. So, okay, so let's perhaps go on to Shahid, because I'm also mindful that he's a bit of on a time constraint as well. And perhaps you could let us know from an end-of-life perspective, from the Muslim perspective, you know, what generally in a perfect world would happen, and then what actually probably does happen in Somerset, because again, we are very limited with the availability of people to help.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Hi, Adrian. Hi. Back on now as well. So yeah, first I'd like to say chaplains, I mean, what you guys do is just fantastic work. Okay, without you, we're very stuck. So, I mean, the points you've raised are quite prominent. For Muslim, when they die, in terms of the washing and all of that sort of stuff, Islam does recommend that males wash males and females wash females. Okay, now, if that's not possible, obviously, we recommend in any scenario that the final rites, you know, the washing of the main parts that might be soiled and stuff like that, because generally with Muslims, they're transferred to a mosque sort of setup where they have sort of community mortuaries, and they're washed 3 times. It's just like us washing for our prayers that we carry out 5 times a day. And like I said earlier on, when we came into this world, we're pure, we have to be returned pure. Okay, so, and they're wrapped in 3 white pieces of cloth. The funeral prayer is said on them, generally in the mosque, but if you look at the traditions, that's the mosque, but the actual religion says that you should just do it at the graveyard, okay, or graveside, okay? So it's quite a simple, straightforward process. Now, as a chaplain, how would you deal with this? I mean, you know, like Martin said, sometimes we don't have all these things available. We don't have Muslim chaplains. We don't have Jewish chaplains. I mean, I'm one of those people, when it comes to community, I say, if we haven't got something, I say, guys, it's your community. This is what you're facing. You know, pull your finger out, get together, get a group of people on a WhatsApp. And we got multi-faith WhatsApp here, for example. And we present this problem to our own community, saying, look, we haven't got this, we haven't got that. Who's available on call to come in if somebody is dying? Okay, and the final stages. And obviously, you know, like Martin said earlier, you know, when we're at that stage in life, we do want our religion because, you know, obviously the heart's beating differently. We know our time on this planet is limited, and all of a sudden we remember, you know, I need to get this bit right. Because obviously, like I said, for Muslims, like many faiths, or if not all, death is a very important part of life. Everything stops at the point of death, and we've got to get that bit right. So I think in Taunton and these areas we're having these issues, we can quite easily fix them, just putting our heads together, getting some people around a table, or even on a WhatsApp group, saying, look, here's a typical scenario, you know, this guy could potentially die without, you know, anyone from his faith visiting him, reminding him about his Lord, and just talking to the team there, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Because obviously, you know, my viewpoint on this is, look, we didn't have a problem with all these people caring for us when we were dying. Okay. So now all of a sudden, we shouldn't start closing doors, you know, because, you know, religion and practices and all this comes in. We had this through COVID, don't forget. We couldn't wash bodies, you know, we couldn't prepare them, you know, so it was a very difficult process. So we learned quite a lot, I think, as chaplains and the end of life bereavement teams. We worked together. We had to come across, you know, with a solution to deal with the problem, and we did, you know, successfully, and we're still here, which is, you know, thank God. So that side of things, I'll be happy to. You could pick the phone up to me, guys, anytime, Laura and your team, and you could say, look, I've got this going on. What do we do? You know, I do this for a lot of the Southwest. So we could help you out there. But going backwards, just before the point of death, is quite important. We always, you know, advise the families that, look, guys, if it's like this, if it's end of life, then we need to think about all these sort of things now. Some people in the Muslim faith tend to transfer home. They want to be with their loved ones. Okay, they don't understand the implications of, you're now not in the hospital's care, you're in the GP's care. Now, if that GP is not around or hasn't seen the patient in a couple of months, then you've got an automatic coroner referral going on. Okay, and the medical examiner is going to be involved, and all of a sudden, all that tells us is the word delay. Okay, so we try and, you know, encourage hospitals and chaplains to pick the phone up as early as they can, and homes and hospices, and we have these conversations. We sort of direct them along the same path, and obviously we've got a duty of care, especially in my religion, the Muslims. When someone dies, we have an exodus of people coming to the hospital. Okay, now obviously we have a duty of care to all those people that are in the hospital, in that ward. So that's one of our very first tasks is, guys, let's just try and manage this. We don't need 350 people on a ward. Okay, we just have to do 2 or 3 at a time, and let's try and transfer the patient to somewhere where it's more suitable. Okay, so that's another thing. Customs, I talked about briefly earlier. You know, you might find the Gambian community do things slightly different to the Arabic community, to the Pakistanis, the Bengalis, you know, and as we have aged through the process of 1400 years of when Islam has arrived on the planet in the final word, you know, things have changed. They've developed slightly. Some people have added a little bit here and a little bit there. Okay, so when we try and talk to councils about, look, you know, a burial provision for Muslims, and I can see where the council's coming from when they think, hold on a minute, that might work for you, but is it going to work for all of these guys and these guys? So my role in the National Burial Council is just to simplify button and say, right, okay, but these are the main criteria that we need. Okay, now all these other little quirks and traditions, and, you know, some people say, oh, we've got to go home first with the coffin, it's got to go this way. They are but traditions. They are not the faith. The faith hasn't changed at all. So what we try and do is help them in that scenario and just simplify it, and we get a facility which is not very difficult. I mean, all it takes is to have, like Martin said earlier, the right people around the table, okay, who are prepared to listen, you know, which is, you know, the key word here. But end of the day, I mean, it's not British law. It's not incumbent on the council to by law provide them with a specific type of burial land. However, it is a duty of care, okay? And we all deserve to be buried in a dignified manner according to our belief, okay? And Islam teaches us prudently that we must respect all faiths, okay? So we find ourselves helping other faiths. They often help us. When we were in the COVID scenario, I was sitting on the resilience panel, we had this body storage issue. How do we get around that? Well, you know, take a leaf out of our book. We don't really need that because we're going to be as quick as we can. And, you know, and we're not going to take funerals on. You know, if our book's fully booked, you know, for the whole of March, we're looking into April, then what we said to those funeral directors is, well, you shouldn't be taking that job on because the NHS is going to be the one picking up the bill storing that body. Do you understand? So there's a lot of things we've worked together to achieve, and then moving on from there. Have I said enough there, Laura and team, on how to go about that? Yeah, is that all right? Yeah,
That's really helpful. Thank you.
great. So
just before you move on,
Roger.
Shahid, I've just realised that Martin's got a bit of a time constraint,
Okay,
and
yeah.
perhaps we can actually, because it is a segue
Yeah.
into organ donation.
You know what? It's the
you
next thing
could-
on my list.
Oh, well, there you go. So if you could talk about Islam and organ donation, and then perhaps Martin, you could comment briefly before you need to go, because there's Dati's law, which has just been made law in Northern Ireland, and I think it's all over the country now, whereas you have to actually physically opt out of organ donation. It's no more I'm opting into it.
That's right.
And so if you could both briefly, perhaps Shahid, if you don't mind, because I'm aware of Martin and the
Yeah,
time.
Martin, you're welcome. Carry
Yes,
on.
if you could go first, and then
Hey,
then
thank
you
you
could
for
say.
that. I appreciate that. I'd just like to say before I come on to organ donations, how refreshing it is to hear Ismail talk, because we have so much in common. And we should be continuing this discussion in the future. As far as organ donation goes, very Orthodox Jews would probably not approve of organ donation because the body must be kept intact. However, most of the people that I know have no problem with that, both in the Exeter and Plymouth communities. We tend to be pragmatic, and it's I mean, there's a Jewish tradition that life is more important than anything else. If you have a medical condition, you should not fast if that affects you on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur. It's actually considered a sin to fast if it's going to affect your health. We're a very pragmatic religion, and I think the same applies here to organ donations. It's up to the individual concerned. I certainly haven't got a problem with it, and I don't think most of the people I know have.
Okay, and I guess from that perspective, you know, now that we're aware, I wasn't aware of this law at all, but I'm new back to the UK. But we need to, I guess, perhaps give the information to find a way, and that's my job, to find a way to actually disseminate this information to all of the communities so people actually understand. And I just want to ask you, Laura, from a medical provider position, what is your position now when somebody dies in relation to organ donation?
You probably know more about organ donation than me, to be fair.
I used to, before I worked in end of life care, I worked in intensive care, and the critical care settings generally are the ones that deal with organ donation, and they are fairly rare occurrences. People have to be identified as a candidate to donate their organs, and they would only take organs from somebody if they were needed. Yeah. So there are multiple people on the organ, so we don't go around with a big kind of wheelbarrow hoiking organs out of patients and just letting them sit, because so if someone is identified as a candidate for being suitable to donate their organs, whether that, so there's two streams, it's heart beating donors and non-heart beating donors. So a heart beating donor is somebody who is confirmed as being brainstem dead, and they can donate their organs whilst their heart is still beating. If somebody is a non-heart beating donor, it means that treatment is to be stopped because it is, futile is a terrible word, but then somebody's not going to get better. They will withdraw the treatment, and then if somebody dies within 4 hours, they will be able to donate certain organs. That process happens for a very small number of the patients that are in intensive care. And in terms of how that law is now enacted, if somebody is on the donor register, which has been going a very, very long time now, it would, I think the family are still approached and said, your loved one, we're going to withdraw treatment. They are on the donor register, and we believe it would be their wish to donate their organs. I think there is still a consenting process to it.
Correct.
Yes,
Um,
there is. Yeah, I was just listening to it on the news this morning.
Yeah.
There is a consenting process in that no, there's a consultation process.
Yeah.
So the families will be consulted,
Yeah.
but the person themselves will have had to have opted out for
Yes.
that not to actually happen.
So
I
if you,
think the
I
families
think
have the
it's
final
in
say.
a world where if you have particularly strong wishes that you don't want your organs donated,
Mm,
it would be that you sign to say, I don't want this to happen.
Mm.
If you're indifferent, or you haven't made up your mind, or you haven't engaged your brain about it because people don't really like talking about or thinking about their own demise, it's, and you know, it's that I think it's for those people who are very clear that they don't want their organs donated. I
Yes.
think it's still a very much a process of discussing with families what the process would be, how it happens. Sometimes it can be about the specific, in my experience certainly, the specific intensive care consultants feelings about the process of involving the specialist nurses for organ donation, because they are some personalities generally that work in it. Sorry, Martin, you've got your hand
Yes.
up.
No, it's just a point that I thought might be relevant. Many years ago, I was chairman of St Albans Round Table when we were very much part of the early Anthony Nolan bone marrow appeal, which some of you will remember. And it fell in my chairman's year that we had the first unrelated match between unrelated donors, which was very successful. And this was a topic at the time. And as far as I'm aware, there were many Jews that were very happy to be involved in being tested, and if necessary, give bone marrow, which is a form of transplant. So the saving of life surpasses all.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think there is a challenging aspect when it comes to not necessarily a religious basis, but there's a huge number of people, the percentage of people who are on the organ donor register who are from a Black or ethnic background, who wait longer because there are not as many Black or ethnic donors as possible. That is something that is a really high issue for the organ donor services at the moment. So just going back to the point I started making earlier and then got sidetracked. If somebody is donating their organs, they will only use the organs that they need to use, if that makes sense. So you can be a candidate to donate everything. So your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, your small bowel, your pancreas, your skin, your heart valves, your corneas, all those, like essentially very much all aspects of your body could potentially be donated now. If you are, as the patient, the candidate to do that, you have to have a candidate who can receive those organs. So just because you've got a healthy heart that would benefit somebody, if there's nobody on the register who matches you, height, weight, all of the antibodies, all of the blood types, all of the factors that go into matching somebody with an organ, if nobody matches you, your heart will stay in your body.
Yeah, it's not automatic, is what
It's
we're
not
saying.
automatic.
So just because it's not in now, like everyone's opting in, doesn't mean organs are going to go be, I just say, harvested with a wheelbarrow. It doesn't happen like that. A lot of the people that we work with are under palliative care, so actually they're very, very poorly. Their organs are failing and packing up, and they cannot donate those organs, but they can still donate other stuff. They can donate tissue. They can donate their corneas. We have a specialist nurse that comes around for the Southwest and talks about corneal donation, and that actually is a very simple thing, but incredibly, it's an incredibly powerful thing to donate and pass on. So there's, even if people are very, very unwell and very poorly, they can still donate some of their body if they still want to. So yeah, I think we only take what we need, really.
Yeah.
We only take what we need. But if people have got strong feelings, Amy's the advanced care planning lead for the trust, and this is a big part of her work, is getting people to talk about death and dying and be open and honest and have those conversations early and say, actually, not for me, I don't want any of my organs donated. And then we know, as long as we know, then that's fine. What happens to somebody's body at point of death is that very much their decision, but we just need to know what that decision is.
Great, thank you. Sorry, Shahid, do you want to then
No, no
continue
problem
with
at all.
our aspect of it?
That's fine. Yeah. So Islamically, there's a dear friend of mine who actually sadly passed away a few years ago, Amjad Ali. He was tasked with engaging with the NHS on this issue of Muslim organ donation, because over the decades, this debate has happened, has come, has gone, and they haven't come to an agreement. So he set about, he used to be the chairman of Amana Finance, which is a global finance thing. So he had access to all the Muslim countries in the Middle East. So they got all these scholars together. Long story short, they all looked at it, they debated it, and then they made a document which was produced here in the UK, which I could send you. It was a very long read, like 100 pages. But they came to the conclusion that yes, you can donate your organs. However, like someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Laura, the different stages of death. Islam actually points all these stages out, right? I think it's 8 stages, a bit like pregnancy in a way. And they have to be past certain stages of life to have that done to it. Okay, so I mean, I'm happy to share that or give you maybe a slimmer version of it. But long and short of it, yes, Muslims can donate their organs with their permission. I also understand that, say for example, I'm going to donate my heart. Not that is much good, but if I did, and if my missus turned around and said, well, no, you're not taking his heart, then that cancels the whole thing. Okay, so the next of kin, we could do anything we want, but if next of kin turns around or family member says, well, I'm sorry, then that's it, it just goes out the window. But the law came in some time ago. I haven't seen it being actioned up to now. Okay, I haven't seen nobody with a wheelbarrow walking around doing any of that. Okay, so that's all pretty good. So yes, it is an option. It needs work, and you know, like the chaplain team said, you know, unless they've got someone waiting for that. I mean, otherwise we can't keep a heart pumping indefinitely. You know, it's not really going to suit anybody. But if I could just go back a couple, if you don't mind, Laura, somebody said something that reminded me on the final rites and washing of the body. A couple of things I should have said is that when the Muslim dies, we should just try and make sure the body's straight and hands by the sides. And what we tend to traditionally do in Muslim countries is they tie the toenails together to keep the feet straight. Okay, literally with a bandage. And obviously close the mouth and the eyes. But you'll generally tend to find, and I've noticed this a lot, that they're normally slightly facing right. So if they're not, then they should slightly face the right, the head, just the head, without forcing it. And that's because the angel of death, the last communication with a person is actually on the right hand side. So it's amazing. As I learned that, I've seen a lot of these people. So those 2 points I think I should have just said earlier on, which would maybe help you out. Okay, and now our cemeteries, I think we've already covered quite well. I mean, I'd be more than happy to sit with a group of people with any council, you know, and it's a very, very simple process. It's allocating a green space, you know, it could be a small field that houses 20 people, you know, and saying, right, this is what we're going to use. This is the direction of that grave if there's a directional requirement. And then it's this logistics of, you know, as and when someone's passing or getting sick or passes away, can you let us know? We agree a sort of a timeline. There's sometimes community assistance that comes in to assist with logistics. And obviously we've got all those other, you know, angels, just like the chaplains, the registrar, the coroner, the medical examiner, the mortuary, you know, having the doctors ready with the bereavement team. So, I mean, together, you know, we can work miracles, I think. You know, and I think it's just simply communication and having the right people to talk to, you know. So we're more than happy, you know, so the work I do isn't necessarily based around Muslim burial provision. It's very much a human aspect of life is death. So I think, you know, we all got a duty of care to provide. And I think if we can work together, I'll be more than happy to put some energy in to that. And any of you are welcome to call me at any time.
I think Laura, you have a question, comment?
Oh no, just say yes, please. That document, that'd be really interesting to read. I hadn't heard of the 8 stages of death. It'd be fascinating to know what that is.
Yeah, it's quite a read. I'm happy to forward that to you.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll pop our team email in the chat, Shahid. So if you could send that over, that would be
by
really
all
helpful.
means. Yeah, I'll dig it out and I'll send it over. I went to a conference about it all, and I sort of fell asleep about midway through it. Okay, and then I was rudely awakened. You know, so
Is there a good sheet?
quite technical. It's very interesting. I found it very interesting, but my God, were they going into some serious detail, you know,
Mm.
these guys.
Yes.
I mean, different stages of death's phenomenal.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Martin?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I do have to go. My apologies.
Thank you
And
so
that's
much.
most
Thank you so
interesting, and
much.
I would like to continue this discussion certainly with Ismail and with Adrian and yourself. I'm sure together we can improve things.
I really think that's a good option, Martin. It's been great talking to you as well. And I'm sure Janine has shared some details, and maybe we could set up a little group.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yes,
good idea.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you so
That's
Just
much,
making
Martin.
the
It's been
best
really
of what we've
helpful.
got.
Thank you
Yes,
so
thank
much,
you.
Martin. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
lovely
Bye.
week.
Bye, Adrian.
So just coming back, Shahid, with the actual when a person actually dies,
Yeah.
obviously the nursing staff will be contacting somebody. Who do they contact? How does that
So-
work?
Yeah, so normally if the deceased or the patient's got a family or friends, and you'll find the more you go out, you know, into sort of rural areas, you'll see Muslims that have married into a non-Muslim family. So there's quite often a mix going on. So you've got somebody who's, you know, British or Argentinian, and you've got Arab, who's Egyptian or Pakistani, whatever. He's sort of kept his faith, she's kept hers. So Islam does permit for you to, you know, marry somebody who's not of the same faith, providing they are of the three major books, providing, you know, they do their thing and worship their God the way they do, and you do yours. So that can be a little bit technical. However, at that point, they make that contact, and if there's a provision in place, you know, which 9 times out of 10, as Muslims, it's the most important thing we do. I mean, when we travel, we should have a will in our pocket, basically, is one of those sort of things. Okay. They say when we die, everyone knows what to do. But if there isn't the next of kin or someone of the same faith, then you're welcome to call people like ourselves. And we can advise and assist. And it's a very important thing you just mentioned there, Janine, because it's within the boundaries of Islam, there's something called Fard-e-Kifaya. Okay. Now, this, put simply, basically means that all you Muslims in this vicinity are equally responsible and sinful if you can't carry out the burial for this chap here that you haven't met since Adam. Okay, so it is, and each and every person in that vicinity carries the same weight of responsibility. All right, so this is why we go down the road. We get together and we do what we've got to do. You know, so and it's quite incumbent on us all. Fard-e-Kifaya is quite a massive thing, you know. So if some chap's just sitting there, got the months in the freezer, then we're all just, you know, getting heavier in debt, really. So it very much is a community action. Guys, we need to sort this out. We need to get this done. Who do we need to talk to? People like my, sorry, Janine, go on.
Oh, sorry. No, go on. Finish what you're saying.
Yeah, people like myself have been brought into the equation to simplify things. Okay, because if you can imagine, 50 years we had our uncles who'd not long been in the country, their English wasn't great, you know, they knew they were here, but, you know, their communication and their method of trying to get things done wasn't the best. Okay, put politely. So when I joined this work about 20 odd years ago, I watched as my 18-year-old cousin dropped dead around me, and I thought, why did it take so long? You know, and I was just curious, and so I slowly sneaked into the mix, and I had meetings with people afterwards, only to understand that, you know, people just didn't do the right thing. You know, the right people weren't informed. Certain mechanisms weren't in place. You know, people didn't understand, you know, what was needed. It wasn't that they didn't want to help; they didn't want to assist. So it was very much the failures I felt were more on the community side than the people providing the care. So we looked at it from a new approach, and we just tried to communicate with everybody, and it's worked a treat. And I think it's took a lot of pressure off the NHS as a whole, because obviously you've got all these people running around trying to deal with something that can be simplified in so many aspects of it, you know, to just streamline it and make it work so much easier. And I think that's what we've achieved on all the major cities around England. Southwest is quite a difficult sort of corner of the country. There's, just like Martin said, there's not a massive population of Muslims. However, it's quite a sizable population, you know, because they've gone everywhere, really. Just like most waves, they've spread themselves around. They tend to have more children than normal, so the families can be bigger. Okay, so you know, I think it's one of those things where we just have to try and work our best together. And sadly, it isn't until we have a death, which was, you know, somebody who's quite well known in a certain area, then we start, you know, hitting the right buttons and people start really saying, okay, you know, we did actually fail, and that what can we do as a community? Because I mean, a lot of this work, guys, we're talking about the faith side of it. There is a massive duty of care from the community itself. Now, if the community itself can't get organized, okay, and come forward and, you know, and speak their mind or make those requests, then, you know, we can't really hold the council or the NHS responsible, or palliative care and all the rest of it. You know, so I'm very much one of those people that, look, if you want things done, then we really need to get off our bums together, put our heads together and have a pragmatic approach on how we can deal with it, you know, and have things in place to make life, you know, of chaplains and everybody else much, much easier, you know, because I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Well, do we do this? Do we do that? No, we shouldn't do it. And then, you know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You see what I mean? So I think we can make life so much easier by just talking. And this, I think Janine's set this up as a fantastic way of looking at the initial issues. How can we move forward? You know, dragging some people, and me and Janine were talking about this, some people who just been sitting on their lards, not doing much, but they are from the area. Okay, so we need to get some of these people a bit more active and become a bit more supportive, you know, of the work you guys are doing as well. And I think long and short of it is we can achieve whatever we set our mind at to achieve, you know.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you very much. So I just want to clarify from a Muslim perspective, just the very basics of how to deal with the body, and to also clarify that even though from the tenets of Islam, you know, we're supposed to be buried as soon as possible, but 24 hours is often bandied around. You have to be buried within 24 hours. And the reason I actually was able to contact you, Shahid, was Anne from St. Margaret's Hospice said that you were wonderful because the staff become very stressed that the body of the deceased person is still there. It's been 24 hours. No one seems to be coming. And that, you know, people, when they certainly don't understand somebody's faith or religion, become very stressed. There's a lot of stress on that staff. So if you could just very quickly clarify for us that rule around the 24 hours.
So what it is with the faith is I mean, 24 hours is ideal, you know. I mean, I had somebody pass away last week who's buried on the same day, you know, same day, really believe it. What it is Islam tells us that we can feel, we can hear, okay? And the longer the process of somebody just sitting there waiting to be buried, it has a bearing on their soul, on themselves as an individual. So that's the main reason for us to speed this process up and try. And you'll notice, you know, when you have Muslim deaths, you know, everyone will be ringing up and saying, you know, is this done, is that done? And we try and take all that away from them and just be the main communicator. And it's a much easier for everybody around the table that you've got one person dealing, you know, with this whole thing instead of having a multitude of calls. And what we end up doing is just running around answering the calls and not getting what we need to get done, which is talking to bereavement, you know, medical examiners and sometimes coroners. Now, if we do have a delay, for example, you know, 41-year-old male drops dead, and obviously straight away, ding dong, we got a coroner's case here. There's a postmortems can take time, so time is a problem. So, well, how do we approach that? I mean, we just let the coroner know, look, guys, chaps of Muslim faith, can you do your best to fast track this, because the mosque's ready, the funeral director's parked outside, you know, they could be there in minutes. So, you know, and 99% of the time, obviously there was a legal case a few years ago, actually, where a Jewish family took the coroner to court because the coroner said, well, no, buddy, you're number 72 and you will remain number 72. And he took him to court in London, and the family actually won. And the judge said, well, no, I'm sorry. He asked for religious, on the background of faith, you should have granted it. And they called it the cab rank rule. So that, I mean, it was simplified for the coroner, you know, and in honesty, we don't really get issues, you know, unless family members get very irate and they use the wrong language, okay? And then, you know, end of the day, if you're going to be like that, then, you know, people are not going to jump around to give you, you know,
Yes, Adrian.
so,
Yeah.
you know, so that is pretty much it. And if there is a delay, we have to, for the right reasons, respect it. We're in England, we've got rules, we've got regulations, which I'm always having to tell the community about. But there is one little, I wouldn't call it a trick up the sleeve, but there's people do have a legal right in the UK now to have an MRI scan instead of a post-mortem. Okay. We're the only funeral director I know of in the Southwest. I've approached the coroners on this. We're authorised, and what actually happens is they send the file of the deceased. In today's case, would be to Oxford, Professor Ian Roberts. He'll look at it and say, "Yeah, I look at it, this case, there's a high chance I can get a cause of death." So then the transfer of the bodies over to our team. They collect from the coroner, go to the scans either 6 in the morning or 6 in the evening. And then they bring back to the coroner, by which time the report lands and we got our cause of death, and off we go. We can now carry on. This is becoming, it's supposed to become, you know, the future really for non-invasive postmortems. Okay. The Muslim community, the Jewish community, and some of the Catholic community are pushing for it more than others are. But we've done a survey. Bristol asked us to do a survey some 8 years ago. And we deliberately went to Joe Blogs and everybody, you know, and then we went to the Sikhs, the Hindus, and then the Jews, and then the very last ones we done were our own community. But what we found across the whole board was, if we asked Jane, look, if your mum passes away, Jane, if you were to pay for a postmortem, would you pay for it rather than have her go through that process? And they all, 90% plus, said yes, they would be happy to pay for a postmortem, an MRI scan, instead of having a postmortem. So it was quite interesting results, really, you know, because obviously we still see our loved ones as our loved ones. And when we apply faith to it, especially Islam, you know, although there's no orthodox verse that tells you that you're going to feel after you die, there's a lot of things that indicate to us that, look, you shouldn't, you know, speak abruptly or try not to. A very good example would be, in Islam, it's not recommended for the ladies to be at the graveside. Okay, now why is that? This is a really good one, because God says, look, that I've created women a lot more emotionally than I've created men. Right? They're low. They've got bigger hearts than men. Okay, so when the deceased is there, you know, and I'm burying my father and my sisters, I could hear them screaming in the background. You know, the deceased can't come out and give them a hug, saying, look, it's going to be all right, and all of that. So it's very difficult for the deceased, and it's very difficult, obviously, for the loved one. So that just gives you an example, really, of, you know, why some of these things are in place. You know, so the ladies normally come to the graveyard after the men have done the burial, and then they pay their respects. You know, so the deceased can't really hear, the crying and the wailing and all of that. So it's quite interesting. I find we live and we learn on these things, you know, day by day.
Sorry, Adrian, yes?
Shahid, really good to encounter you, and I hope we can, as Martin said, we can follow up with further discussions. I just wanted to ask, and this is because I have a background in broadcasting advising. I was the ITV's interfaith or faith advisor for a number of years, and I've always, with respect, exercised great caution when people have given the name of a faith. Islam, with its many and varied and interesting diverse faith aspects. Are there any pitfalls? I mean, you may hesitate to answer, any pitfalls to avoid when we hear of issues between Sunni, Shia and other strands of Islam when it comes to this issue of bereavement and practices regarding deaths? I mean, for me to come and say, if I was in Northern Ireland a few years ago and say I want the Christian perspective, I would have had to walk a very delicate path between, Protestants, Catholics, and the caricatured extremes of them. And I'm making the point for effect, but I don't want to offend anyone. I want to be as accommodating, but I just need to know if there's anything I should ask in nuance carefully. Can you tell me from your particular? You've mentioned the breadth of practices.
Very interesting question, Adrian. You know what? I mean, all communities have their issues. And for me here, I've had to get them around the table many a times. And I use death right, as the agenda, saying, guys, we all need to sit down around a table. And, you know, they all got their little differences and Sunni, Shia, and they're quite prominent sometimes, especially when you look around the world. I mean, God knows what these guys are having for breakfast, but goodness me, it's not the same as what I eat. But, you know, when it comes to death, they all seem to be on the same page,
Okay.
right? So everything I've discussed here would apply to a Sunni, a Shia,
Yes.
or
Yes.
whatever else they
Yeah.
class themselves with. And Islam itself, you know, doesn't really determine, look, guys, you've got all these different departments or you know, slightly different variations. This is where people have come along and someone's got super holy, and this guy said, look, you know, if I said to you, look, I'm going to the sky, he could determine it or describe that sentence differently. So his understanding of that particular verse is different. So he's given this elated status, and all of a sudden this dude is now got his own following, and this is how it's just moved on, you know, and people have sort of diverted slightly from the true faith, and this division is very much a spanner in the works, because when I talk to them about death, you know, kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut, which means in Islam, in Arabic, is look, every soul shall taste death. Okay, so everyone here, everyone there, everyone sitting on our table, we're going to talk about this discussion. We're all going to die. You know, this is guaranteed. So let's just let all this other stuff park on the side, and let's talk about these issues that we need to get you around the table about. So that's a very good point. But it's within the boundaries of Islam. I deal with a lot of them. Okay, and no, that they have a few little quirky bits. So like the Shias would insist that the body goes home before it goes to the cemetery. You know, and we remind them that, look, guys, we haven't got a helicopter. We're here, you're there, cemetery's here, the mosque's over there. It's not possible. Okay, so sometimes we can't accommodate it.
Yeah.
But yes, they do have some bits like this, but the general process of the death and the bereavement and what the chaplains will have to deal with, the warden, all that stuff is generally all okay. We don't have any issues there. So, but it's such a very, very good point, you know, but I mean, I've got them all around a table, and like I said, I use that as the magnet really, and they don't seem to disagree on anything in particular, you know. So
Laura?
I just want to apologise. My team's got to leave for another meeting, I'm afraid, but this has been so fascinating and so helpful.
Okay.
Janine, could I get the rest of the recording off you, if that's okay?
Yes, we will continue. Yeah, we'll continue with the recording, and we will distribute it out to everybody.
Fabulous.
And
Thank
Laura,
you so much for your time. We
anything,
really
just,
appreciate it.
if you need anything that I can assist you with, then just pick the phone up.
Yes, if we could get your email, Shahid, that'd be really wonderful.
Yes,
We'd
if you
love
need
to
to
keep it.
pass you my details, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Really
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank
this morning.
you.
We appreciate it
Thank you so
massively.
much.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So Nagar, maybe you can give us a little bit about the requirements of the Baha'i faith around dying and death and burial, please.
Okay, thank you.
And organ donation. Did we touch on you with organ donation yet? No.
Organ donation is absolutely fine,
Okay.
no problem.
Mhm.
Baha'is have to be buried unless there is a medical reason for cremation. As I said, they have to be directed towards Akka, where Baha'u'llah is buried. And I could show you, if I can share the
Yes,
screen.
please. Yes, please.
See my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Okay.
Nothing's come up yet.
So on Google Map, this is Israel. Oops, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Has it come now?
It has, thank
Yeah.
you. Yep.
This is Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big city of Haifa there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Akka. And in northern part of Akka, there is a shrine of Baha. And if I touch it, you will see some photographs of the actual place.
Wow.
This is where Baha'u'llah is buried.
That's beautiful.
He lived in this house on the left, in this mansion, and he was buried there next to. So if I get rid of the picture, you see if we are in Somerset, if I make this map quite a lot smaller, so from Britain, where we are, and that the bottom dot is where I am, it has to be directed towards Haifa, to there. And from anywhere in the world, it should be directed to that point. And I'll stop sharing.
And can I just ask, is that the head, any part of the body, the feet? Which way does the body actually get laid?
Very good point. The feet has to be directed. So if the person stands up, if you imagine a person, he's directed, he's praying, because that's when we pray daily, we pray to the point of adoration. So it's your feet has to be directed to there.
Okay.
A burial has to be in a wooden coffin or stone coffin. It has to be hard wood. The body can be wrapped either in silk or cotton. It's 5 layers or 5 pieces. It's not specified, so how you do it. So you have to work it out, and different Baha'is at different parts of the world do it. It's not critical. It's not important. You do it. I had to ask around because I'm the only Baha'i here, and I had to ask around to find out how to do it. So basically, I bought a coffin, shroud from actually a Muslim outlet. It was pure cotton, and I cut it so I had because that's what I was told. We have a cloth for each leg, a cloth for each arm, and then one for the whole body. And I tied it up. The funeral directors helped me. You have to wash the body first as well, and that was done by their help.
Is there sorry to interrupt, is there a ritualistic washing of the body like there is in Islam?
Not specified.
Not
Not
specified.
you just have to wash it. So however you do it, they did it with a cloth and some soap and water, and wash the body. I mean, if you have a Baha'i cemetery, which they have, I come from originally from Bahrain, and there is a Baha'i cemetery there. It's a specific room for washing the body. I don't know how they do it, but they have the facilities there to do it properly. But in a little room, in a funeral directors, there isn't a lot of facilities. But anyway, and you say prayers as you can at the time when it's done. And it's a comfort to say the prayers, because I had to be there. It's quite difficult for my husband. Our men and women can both be there. I mean, it's not specified at all. It's not a problem. At the time of the internment, people gather around the grave, and then there is a prayer which has to be said at the graveside, and I can share that with you as well. If I can share the screen again. Sorry, I don't know what I've done wrong. So start again. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we have to go there. So this is the prayer for the dead.
Oh, that hasn't come up.
And any Baha'i, and have you seen it? Can you see it?
No,
it
just the
hasn't come up.
screen, but not the prayer.
All right. I'll start again. I'll stop and then I'll start. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but it's
See
not,
the
nothing's
screen,
coming up on
yes.
it, look, I know.
Does it say prayer for the dead?
No,
No, it doesn't know.
How about now?
no,
No, still the same. Still the same.
There's nothing. You don't see anything.
no, we
It
just see
it's
screen
just screen
broadcast
broadcast,
Zoom.
yeah.
Okay, I'll sorry about this.
If you can
Maybe
send
you
it to
could,
Janine.
maybe you could
You
share
could
that with
send that
me and
probably,
we
yeah,
can,
that'd be
I
great.
try once more,
Okay,
and if it
okay.
doesn't work, I'll do it that way.
okay. If it doesn't work, yes, we can share it and we can edit it into the video
Yeah.
at the end. Yeah.
It's gone to the share screen.
Ah,
Oh, now it's gone to your home screen.
There you
Yay!
ah,
go.
well done.
Well done. Well done.
Okay, wonderful. So this is a prayer for the dead,
Mhm.
and it's the same prayer. It's, I think, for females, you say the daughter of thy servant. That's all. It's the same prayer. Or I can't remember. It's specified. You and a Baha'i or a non-Baha'i can say it. It's not a specific that you have to be a Baha'i, as long as this
Okay.
prayer is. And the interesting thing about it is these verses, we all verily worship God, is repeated 19 times. And then you say Allahu Akbar, and then you go to the next one, and that's repeated 19 times. So there is 6 verses, which each has to be repeated 19 times. Yes, if the dead be a woman, let him say, this is thy handmaiden,
Handmaiden.
and the daughter of thy handmaiden. So that's what you say. That's the difference between a man and a woman. Oh, and the other thing, which is interesting, and I've forgotten the verse, every Baha'i, as they're buried, you have to have a ring on their finger, which is made of very soft metal, so you can squeeze it. You can put it on and squeeze it so that it will fit any finger. Male and female is the same verse. There's a verse
And
embossed on it.
is that so? For example, that would be put on before the washing of the body. How would that?
It's not critical.
It's not critical.
So
So from
from
a nursing perspective, if a person of the Baha'i faith dies in their care, they would be allowed to wash the body.
yes. it's
Okay,
before-
and then a Baha'i person would wrap the body and
Yeah.
put the ring on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Or they might have, if they might wash it again. I mean, I didn't know what the nurses had done. So you do
Okay.
it. You do
But
it.
from
the
their
same-
perspective, that's all
Yeah.
they would need to do is wash
Yes.
the body. Yeah.
Absolutely fine.
Okay.
Absolutely fine. Yeah.
And is
Um,
there anything, sorry to interrupt, I just want to say this before I forget, is there anything in the last hours or moments of death that perhaps nursing staff should be aware of for someone who's Baha'i?
No, there's nothing.
Okay.
If a Baha'i is present, they usually say prayers. I
Mhm.
mean, we were called a lady who died in Taunton, but they knew that she's going to die within the next half an hour or so. So we just sat there and said prayers.
Mm.
That's all. There's
Okay.
nothing.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, guys, I got to run. I've got to disappear, I'm afraid. So I've got a couple of people queuing up now outside my office. I got to
Sure.
go back to my normal day job, which is
Yes.
selling cars, I'm afraid. Very different to what we do with death.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so
It's going to be
much.
great to meet you all.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the contact list, Janina. Let's see if we can work together and take it
Yes,
to the next
we
level.
meet again. That'd be good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
Nice
good.
to
Thank
meet
you
you
so
all.
much.
Hi, Michael. We
Assalamualaikum.
didn't get to talk, but nice to meet you. Right?
Oh, this is my principal.
Thank
He's
you.
my principal. So yes,
She's
he's
done well, I
taking
think,
it all
today,
in.
don't you think? She's done well.
She's fantastic as always.
She's full of inspiration.
Thanks so
Well,
much.
thank you very much. Well, let's hope we can
Assalamualaikum.
do it again and take it to the next steps.
Thanks,
Will
Shirley.
do, inshallah.
Lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Salam.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Okay, sorry, Nagar, go on.
That's fine. There's nothing else to add. Unless you have questions, please ask.
Could I ask one? Good to be with you, Nagar. Is there a time imperative, as there is with Islam, for
No.
the burial? No.
A space, a distance imperative, but not time.
No. Okay.
It creates actually problems if Baha'is have died in other countries, because you have to get used to whatever is done there, in different countries. So we have to be very quick and find
So
out.
it's kind of you stay where you lay. That's
Yeah.
the ruling. And so,
You
for
do-
example, if I was visiting France and
Yeah,
I died, then I would be buried in France, even
Yes.
though my family are
Mm.
in England or wherever.
absolutely. You do not
Okay.
carry bodies around the world.
Okay.
Okay. And so if, for example, I was traveling as a Baha'i and I was in France and I had died, would the family contact, like, oh, let's do it the other way around. So someone from France has traveled to England because we're dealing with the carers in an English situation, and they've got into a hospital, and Laura and her team are looking after them, caring for them, and they die. Do they contact someone of the Baha'i faith in England to help with that? And do we have contacts of those people that they would contact?
I think every hospital has got contact
Okay.
information. If not, there is a Baha'i.org online. Say if the country which you don't know who to contact, they contact the Universal House of Justice, which resides in Haifa in Israel, and then they will have contact details for every country in the world, and the National Assembly of that country would be informed, and the local spiritual assembly, if there is one in that locality, will officiate.
Okay. And are there people, you mentioned before funeral directors, are there funeral directors who are, like we just had Shahid, who basically does, Muslim funerals. Are there people specifically that do
No,
Baha'i
not
rituals?
in UK. I
No.
don't know of any funeral director who is a Baha'i in UK.
Okay.
I know, because I'm from Middle East, from Bahrain, I know that what happens there. Each Gulf state has got a funeral, a cemetery, and the Baha'is are enough of them there to deal with each problem, when it arises, to deal with it. Baha'is have got a lovely cemetery in Bahrain, and it was given them for free by the government.
Okay, so with this stay where you lay rule, if I'm, traveling from France and I've arrived in England, I have no family here, and the hospital or the Baha'i organization contacts a funeral director to assist me, they will then also be required to do the burial plot and everything else, because I obviously have no family, I'm from France. Would that organization deal with the burial plot and everything?
What is amazing, when I asked the local parish council here, and they said, yes, we could have this burial plot. We have to buy 2. It was reasonably priced. It was only £200 a plot, so it wasn't too much. Then they have somebody who's a grave digger, and surprisingly enough, the grave digger had dug graves in other parts of the Southwest, and he knew about the fact that it had to be directed to a certain way. And we, the parish council, the funeral director, and the grave digger gathered in the cemetery and ascertained the direction correctly
Oh, lovely.
together, and then
that's
they
lovely.
dug the grave.
That's lovely. And can you put well, this was a question I should have asked Shahid and Martin. Can you put another body inside that same, like, for example, my parents are buried together many, many years apart,
Yeah.
but
So-
you could put,
Yes, you can.
so
I mean, they give us, the plot is quite large anyway. You could put one on top of the other
Yeah.
if you dug
Yeah.
it deep enough, or you could
Yeah.
put one next to the other.
okay, but that's allowed to put the
Yes, yeah.
same body in the same
Yes.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, all right. Well, that's great. Thank you very much. So any questions from anybody? Nope. Okay, so Adrian, maybe we can just get a little bit of an overview from
Yes.
the various people you've been in contact with and worked with over the years.
Yes, thank you, Ginny. Well, for the benefit of those who are going to watch the video later, can I just say that I'm not sure if it'll come out with my
It's
blurring
blurred.
on.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's
the,
good.
major emergency plan in the event of a big incident or emergency or disaster in this part of the world, the Avon and Somerset policing area. The reason I refer to this document is that some years ago, and I'm joint coordinator with our senior police chaplain for this plan, we have had in the past over 200 members of faith communities who've trained to be available in the event of an emergency. And it could be at the scene of the incident, it could be at a rest centre or at the hospitals supporting the existing hospital chaplains. And so again, 20, 30 years, this has been evolving. And we were gifted by probably your predecessor, Janine, some while ago, a faith guidelines appendix. It may not, again, come out too well, but you can see the symbols of the major faiths. It's not it's not exhaustive. And the idea with that page, frankly, is if the person is conscious and able to comprehend, to at least point to the symbol. I mean, you come down an emergency to doing as best you can. And that then, using the appendix, gives different pages for each of the major faiths. Now, this cannot be definitive in the size document I've got. But I think the point, and from what I've picked up having joined the meeting a little later, the key tenets have been mentioned. One is the intention to show respect to the deceased, to their loved ones, to their faith and beliefs at all times. Clearly, we check our recruits carefully that they're not bringing baggage and an agenda that would undermine the good work we seek to do for people of all faiths and none. The other overriding principle, and I think I've heard this from a number, is please ask. The most helpful approach can be to say, I'm here to help. How can I be of help? And to say to whoever's in orbit, certainly from the point of view of anyone, the dying person, clearly if they have capacity at that late stage in their life to answer questions, language can be a barrier, but hopefully with modern technology and the emergency services, the health services, access to language line and other aids, we would hope we could overcome that. But when the chips are down and in a crisis, it may be as simple as referring to our booklet and doing the best we can. So I don't want to be in any way relaxed about it, but clearly the context I've come to this as a multi-faith chaplain, you know, we want to be as helpful as we can and to facilitate, not necessarily do something ourselves. It's fair to say over the years we have been told, Shahid would be a good example, if there is no one else, people have found, you know, a fellow human being alongside is the best act of compassion that we can offer. Just if needs be, to be there in silence, making our own devotional offering, and just that sense of no one dying alone, and that's important. If I may come to my own faith tradition, which is that of a Christian background, then in Somerset, and certainly the Musgrove Park Hospital, I'm aware that whilst the chaplaincy is slightly limited in the hours it can be available, the Roman Catholic denomination have an agreement that the priest can be contacted at any time of the day or night, and those of a Catholic faith who wish it can avail themselves of the opportunity of a final confession, receiving absolution, a sacrament which is held very special in the Roman Catholic spectrum of the Christian faith, and of course what people talk about, the last rites. So there are set prayers that a Catholic priest will pray either at the time of death or even very shortly afterwards. I think it's accepted that priests don't always get there in time to be with them before the moment of death has come, and we would understand that, again, that was with the best intention. It's invidious to try and say there is one outline for every person within the Catholic, within the Christian faith, but generally speaking, now, it wasn't always the case, burial or cremation are equally accepted, and as long as the deceased is shown respect, I don't think there's likely to be any particular outcry from anyone of a Christian tradition. Some, as I say, more likely to be of a Catholic faith or a high church Anglican tradition. They're perhaps seen as the equivalent of Roman Catholics, might want to receive Holy Communion. But again, that could be administered by someone that's licensed to administer it, or a fully ordained priest in the Catholic tradition. Generally, there are no religious objections to post-mortems, and I think given that the country has made its law about organ donation based on the majority ethnicity, it's unlikely, but of course there are exceptions. Interestingly, I took the trouble to look at what Jehovah's Witnesses, who are sometimes seen as outside or on the fringe of the Christian belief pattern, Jehovah's Witnesses are able to engage with organ donation, but the blood has to be drained. You're aware they believe that the lifeblood is the crucial part, which is why there's the highlighted issues of them not undergoing blood transfusions. But again, I would hesitate to speak on behalf of that community without someone coming in and saying, there is a central view, because individuals may vary. I mean, again, I'm happy to answer any questions. One point I would make, because we're in the Taunton area, is that our crematorium, which I'm very familiar with, having been in a past life the councillor responsible for that aspect of council life. It is a council-run crematorium, and I'm a celebrant and a minister who's conducted ceremonies there. If other faiths wished, it is not a problem to remove any of the Christian symbols. There is a big cross that sits on the stone wall, but it is easily removed. And the intention has always been that that crematorium is available to every member of the community, those of all faiths and none. And there will be no grudging reluctance or anything other than a willingness to help a bereaved family, a community, if they wish to use the crematorium in Taunton.
I just have a question with chaplaincy and the end of life. We get a lot of questions from people working in Musgrove Hospital and across Somerset regarding interfaith chaplaincy, and asking for people of other faiths to be involved, Hindus, Muslims, Baha'i, other people to be involved. But what I've tended to find is that there isn't a lot of conversation around having other Christian groups involved as such. And so you've now mentioned Jehovah's Witnesses, there's Jesus Christ Church of Latter-day Saints,
Yes, indeed.
A variety of, there's Plymouth Brethren. I mean, there's quite a variety of Christian faiths who are not the mainstream. And are there, do you know of anything that, any ways, perhaps nursing staff or whatever, they could reach out to people of those smaller in number Christian faiths in the area that might help them with some information?
I think because the hospital chaplaincy is centralised on the team that operate out of the designated faith space, I would suggest you contact it. Julia French is the lead chaplain at Musgrove, and I have every confidence she will have experienced, and her colleagues will have experienced, those situations and scenarios. And I think this comes back to both as the faith representatives, but the families. We've got to inculcate this culture of asking, not assuming it's going to be a problem. I mean, to hear Shahid talking very freely and in a relaxed way, again, in no means diminishes the approach. I think it is healthy that we have a robust, a free-flowing two-way conversation where we can ask any questions. They won't be misinterpreted. I mean, that's always been our worry, is that even in asking the questions, someone will ascribe some motive to it. It genuinely is, I don't want to cause any upset. How can I best serve the person who's dying and their loved ones and their faith community? Please help me to help you. Clearly, many of us see ourselves as signposters or gate openers, not gatekeepers, who can, I don't know, but I know a man or woman who can help you. It may be the best thing we can do in those scenarios, and that would certainly be my intention. You will find, certainly within the Christian tradition, a broad spectrum of people in, I'll call ministry and in faith leadership, some of whom would not engage in a prayer, would not use a prayer, feel comfortable offering anything that deviated from their possibly perceived narrow belief framework. You will find others, particularly in the Church of England, who will be very happy if it would be helpful to read, to share words, devotional resources from another tradition, completely alien, indeed even one that may in discussion appear to contradict something they believe. It is not possible to say one size fits all. I hope everyone would act with kindness, respect and compassion, but I think we have to respect that, as with the other faiths, there is a spectrum of belief and practice, and some will say this far and no further. One hopes that we are learning, because it's a process that's gone on since time immemorial. There is little to be gained by picking fights with people, not least in a time of distress and emotional upset. People have made mistakes. They're often unintended mistakes. They're not deliberately setting out to trip others up. We try and be helpful where we can, but we ask for an equal measure of respect towards the strongly held views. So the phrases that might be used are conservative evangelicals. Would probably not. And you mentioned Plymouth Brethren. I mean, they operated for many years under the label of exclusive. And they too, rather like the Muslim community, would often have a particular perspective on the role of men in their faith and practice. So again, without seeking to speak for them, I wouldn't be surprised if a Plymouth Brethren community operated in a way that was sometimes more akin to the cultural practices of Islam around the graveside than to a more liberal, free and open aspect of some churches.
I'd just like to kind of clarify that point. Having attended, funerals for many different Muslim cultural groups, while generally women don't go to the grave or aren't there at the actual burial, certainly not the case living in South Africa. Women are there. Certainly not the case in many parts of the Turkish community. So I think a lot of it comes around the fact that the Arab cultures, and certainly the time of our prophet, peace be upon him, and certainly the African cultures, there's a lot of keening, there's a lot of wailing, it's very loud, it's very emotional. And I think as cultures have progressed, or other cultures have become Islamic, their own cultural practices have brought about a calmness to the graveside. So and I often find that when you are in an environment where Muslims are the minority, and you have at a graveside a Bosnian, an Arab, an Indonesian, and it's easier to just say that's the rule. No women allowed, but in actual fact, it's not actually a lived experience. And having actually spent the past 10 years in South Africa, women are always at the graveside. And I also think that's a bit of a difficulty as well, to kind of have this, which what we're talking about is this blanket view of everything. But on the other hand, it's, if you don't know, it's better to refer to blanket view, because then you're not going to get anything wrong.
Yes, I think it's the default position.
Yeah.
But also, and I wave my document again, if this document does nothing for me and my team, it should prompt us to say what would be most helpful in this situation. I am aware that there are particular mores and the potential for special needs. Can you tell me what they are? And that's the million-dollar question. Just help me, and I'll help you as best I can.
Yes, Nagar?
I was just going to ask, is there a Baha'i one in there, Adrian?
No, there's not. They are limited, and it would never profess to cover. There's the Jains. Gosh, I'm thinking what I've come across over the years. This is Buddhist, Christians, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, and Sikhs. At the risk of being flippant, the recent census tells us that in this part of the world there are more Jedi Knights than there are Jewish people. I don't particularly relish the prospect of trying to put a Jedi Knight section in, but you'll get the idea. And indeed, if you go to Glastonbury, I forget, Janine will tell us how many different faiths groupings are listed in the Glastonbury area.
Oh, gee, thanks putting me on the spot. I don't
Well,
know, but I think it's about 70. I think
It's got to be
about
70 or 80, I think
Yes,
I've heard.
yeah,
So
yeah.
again, they would
So-
all hold to their particular,
Mm. And I think there's a few Jedi Knights there as well.
quite
So,
likely.
yeah, which is great. I mean, good. If that's what you know, if this is your belief, this is your belief. And I think that, you know, the opportunity to have as many voices at the table is a really good place to start. And the work that you're doing, Adrian, you know, it is the beginning. It's the beginning of everything. And,
Yes.
you know, this project is really only just starting to chip away at the tip of the iceberg, and really not even look at what's sitting underneath the sea, because it's not something that has really had a lot of attention, I guess, over the years. And also, I mean, understandably, you know, there's you know, my lovely very famous, I think it's becoming saying now, for every white Christians you have half a Sikh. So, you know, there's not, the demographic is not there, but it is slowly changing. And I think the fact that we can get as many voices at the table to events like this, you know, is really the beginning of finding out what we can't know what we don't know.
No.
And so to have as many voices at the table gives us an opportunity to address what we don't know.
Yeah, Gillian, can I also state what might appear to be some to be the blindingly obvious, which is the census, the latest census has revealed that more than half of the population would say they have no faith. We now operate in an environment where historically, whether predominantly Christian or anything else, or in other parts of the world predominantly Muslim, at least you could say you understand faith. You are a person of faith, and therefore you hold to certain values and ways of conducting yourself. We now have the situation, regardless of whatever efforts are made for religious education or faith awareness in schools, where people don't necessarily come from that point of having faith high up the process. So they face a death and they may have all sorts of questions, and it's my experience that they do, but we are not necessarily able to use some of the language or the understandings that perhaps historically you could to someone of any faith and say, well, you get faith, you get the idea of faith. Let me explain, mine's different or has variations. Now I think we have to have that, and the hospital staff will be representative of that. But also, if they start talking in terms of faith, they may get a range of reactions, some of which might surprise them. Yeah, you know, we have to help people where they are, not project to where they might have been historically, or where we'd like them to be in an enlightened community.
That's exactly right. And I think that the initiative that Laura and her staff have taken to try and find out as much as they can and start learning to be able to treat people as respectfully as they can in this very difficult time, maybe not of their own lives, maybe they've made peace with it, but certainly of that of their families and their loved ones. So to acknowledge that they want to be as respectful and honoring as they can be is a wonderful place to start. So so thank you everybody, and thank you for the patience of the revolving door of this webinar. But as I said right in the beginning, Adrian, you weren't here. There's been some physical challenges, time challenges, constraints of people, and they were certainly voices that really added to the conversation. So it was great that everybody could make it in whatever way they could, and hopefully this will just be the beginning of better, greater, more in-depth and productive conversations. And I just want to thank everybody for attending and for your time, and to say to Nagat, have a great holiday. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you for facilitating it.
Okay.
Good to see you all. Take
Yes.
care.
That's
Good to see
fantastic.
you.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. So
Really good. Well done, Janine.
Very
Fantastic.
interesting,
Really,
wasn't it?
really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I
People
learned
were
something.
really engaged. And I
Mm.
think, I was personally really interested as well in terms of the rituals before the
Mm.
death and straight after the death, and how people approach that matter, especially if there's a lack of people from the same community. So
Mm.
you could tell that Laura would like to have those tips, if you like. But it was fantastic. It was super interesting. Therefore, I decided to stay.
Yes, yes,
You
probably
know?
a bit more interesting than the other one where we were just still talking about clothes and something else.
Yeah.
The agenda was
Especially,
like, but that's what we
especially
talked about
that.
last week.
Yeah. Especially that you are going to talk to him and establish bits and bobs. So
Mm.
yeah, it was fantastic. Well done.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And yes, I'm gonna.
Oh, by the way, it's still recording, so perhaps whoever will
Yes,
edit
no,
it
I'll tell
will
Nikki.
do-
Yes,
Yeah,
no, I'll give her,
but
because also she'll have to edit that bit with Nagar trying to get the screen on and
Right.
everything else. Yeah.
you
yeah.
asked me in your email in terms of the hours for Saturday,
Oh, yes.
and I've noticed that also I haven't approved